The game industry has been on a bit of a nature bend recently, with many games coming out in which you grow plants or grow trees or grow an entire garden or watch grass grow or climb trees or worship nature spirits. Whatever it is, we're doing a lot of it in the outdoors with green all over the place. Hasbro got in the trend as well with the release of Life in Reterra, designed from Eric Lang and Ken Gruhl, in which you are rebuilding after the collapse of civilization. We don't have to worry about what caused the collapse. We're just worried about the rebuilding, right? Reterra. You are re-earthing the land. Reiner Knizia has something along the same lines with Rebirth, a game coming out from Mighty Boards at SPIEL Essen 24, in which you will have had some disaster happen, and now you are rebirthing the land by building it up. It's a tile laying game. You're going to place tiles on the board, and it all represents civilization coming back and you founding things again and supporting existing structures that are left behind from whatever happened. No one knows. All that I'm showing you is a mock-up from Mighty Boards. It is not the final components or graphics. Please keep that in mind as you watch the following. Here's one side of the double-sided game board in Rebirth, with Scotland here and Ireland on the other side. You are trying to rebuild the land by populating it with your tiles. You are going to establish energy farms and food farms in support of castles and cathedrals that have been left behind. You will be rebuilding settlements as well. Again, graphics not final. All these yellow bits will go away so the cathedrals pop more and you can spot them. Same goes for the settlements. To set up, you shuffle all your tiles face down, take 2 of them, look at them so you know what you have now removed from the game, but no one else gets to see that. And then draw a tile. Each turn you are going to place 1 tile on the board. That's it. You have 1 tile, so in one sense you have no choice, but you have possibly dozens of places to go, so you have lots of choices. You are trying to do as many things as possible with your 1 tile, as in many classic Knizia games. Here, if I have an energy farm tile, I must place it on an energy farm space, or a space that has no symbol. Nothing goes where the castles and cathedrals are. Cannot go in the settlements unless you have a settlement marker. I can place this tile here, and after placing an energy tile, you look at how many tiles you have in this cluster of that type. I have 1, so I get 1 point. If I add this in the future, I have 2 points. Or if I go here, 2 points. If I go here, it's only 1 point, but of course, if I connect it later, 3 points. In addition, if you are the first person to place next to a castle, then you take 1 of your castle tokens and put it on the board. At the end of the game, each castle you have on the board is worth 5 points. If someone comes and places more tiles next to you, all right, here's one, whoop, I'm out, orange is in. I can reclaim it by marking these 2 spaces. Can't go where the cathedral is, but ownership of this castle is still up for grabs at this point. In addition to getting 1 point here and calling dibs on the castle, I am next to a cathedral. The first time you go to a cathedral or adjacent to a cathedral, you put 1 of your tokens on the board and you draw a mission card. You look at this card, no one else does. Mission cards are worth 3 or 5 points at the end of the game. 3 points if you don't have to do anything, so that's kind of a nice gimme. 5 points if you have to do something. Typically having the most of something, the largest of something. I'll show you more examples in the future. There's a map of Scotland here with all of the castles highlighted on them so you can see where you're going. If I have more castles on the board than each other person, with ties being friendly for all of these mission cards, I get 5 points, in addition to the 5 points for going here. So 1 mission card to work on. Okay. Other people are going to go, they're going to do other things. They might go here, and now they're at this castle and that cathedral. Blue's going to go as well. I'll have them start a food farm. Okay, 1 point here. Food farms score the same way. So they'll have a castle and a cathedral and a mission of their own. Orange will have a mission, 1 point. You're trying to do many things, and often at the beginning of the game, you're going for these nice spots that's getting you 3 things at once, because of course you will get mission cards and they direct you a bit in the future. I now know I want the most castles. So maybe if I draw another energy tile, go here. So I get 2 points, and I'm now working on here. Okay. If, let's see, if orange goes here, they draw a settlement. Settlement tiles have 1, 2, 3, or 4 houses on it that shows your influence in that settlement. They can go here. They are adjacent to the castle. They now have 2 tiles next to it. If you place a tile in a lone settlement that's only 1 hex, you score as many points as the number of houses on that tile. If there is a port on that tile, or on that space, and there are several ports around the board, it's worth 1 additional point. So 4 points for orange. In a medium segment that is 2 hexes large, then when it's filled, whoever has more influence will get 5 points, and the second person 3 points. I'll highlight it up on the board here. If there's a tie, the person who went in last is going to be considered the lower tile, because they didn't have to tie, but they chose to tie by going there, so they're looked down upon a little bit. You didn't bring more mojo to the settlement here, so we'll give orange more points. So, one tricky thing about the castles, there is a tie for ownership of the castle, 2 and 2, but energy and farm tiles count more than settlements. So I have 2 versus 1, so orange goes, I stay. I get 1 point for this, and so on. I will probably not be counting points for the remainder of the game because you get the sense of how it's going to work. Each time you put down this, how many are in that cluster? How many are in this cluster? Settlements score when they are filled. A settlement of 3 tiles scores 8 points for whoever has the most influence, 5 for second. If there's a tie again, the person who goes last gets considered lower. If there's a tie for other people, not you, if I go 2 and there's a 1 and a 1, whoever is closest to me clockwise wins the tie. Because again, the person who went after them is a follower, doing the exact same thing as the other person, copying them. Lame. Why do that? Okay, draw a tile, place a tile. That's it. Extremely straightforward. Except you're working long-term on many different things, including various mission cards. There are, as I mentioned, the 3-point bonus. Don't do anything, just get 3 points. Okay, you'd rather have 5 points though, but in this case you have to have the most spaces around Dumfries Cathedral with your tiles. And it's marked here, Dumfries. There are 5 spaces available because you can't go in the castle. If you draw this, now you need to know possibly where you go next. Again, go here, Dumfries, start working on that, get a new mission next to a castle, and so on. And so now placing here gets me 2 points, but also secures that. So again, everything starts working together to score points or solidify holdings or knock other people out. You have similar cards to the cathedral cards with castles. Not every cathedral and castle has a card in the deck, at least in this mock-up. Many do, mostly the ones in the middle with lots of spaces around them, because then there'll be more to fight over and more spaces to go to fight over things. You have, okay, most border spaces. There's not that long of a border with England, but whoever gets the most can get 5 points. Longest coastline. So count the chain here. They're all depicted on the card. There's lots of cities on the edge of the board that is going to break up the coastline. So you'll have a short coastline 2, and here only 4, and so on. So you're going to look for those spaces, try to occupy them. You have most energy farms of size at least 3. You have a similar one for food, and in addition for each of those, largest food, largest energy farm. As I mentioned, all ties are friendly. So you don't care if someone gets bigger. If someone ties you, you only care if they get bigger. So there is a lot of blocking going on for the mission cards, but also just blocking in general, because if I'm going along and I get another one and I get another one and so on, someone might decide to block me just so I don't score a huge number of points here. Regardless of whether I have a mission card or not, they might go here. But they might also go here because they want to establish their own chain. Down here, they're now next to this castle. They go next to this one. They go next to this one. Again, do several things at once. Almost always 2. All right, sometimes 3. What else do we have? We have cards like this. Most small settlements. So there's a limited number of small settlements on the board. If you occupy at least as many as the other player with the most, 5 points. One thing missing on this card, how many small settlements are there? They are not depicted in this card. So again, non-final graphics, hopefully they're depicted in the final one, or at least they tell you how many small settlements are on the board. Most ports, you have most medium settlements. That is, if you occupy both spaces, they have a presence in medium settlements, presence in large settlements. You can imagine the variety of things that we have here. Again, Blair Castle, Inverary Castle. Okay. You place tiles until everyone runs out of tiles. If there's any incomplete settlements, then they just score whatever the number of houses is. If no one ever goes here, I get 3 points. 5 points for each castle. Score your mission cards. Done. I can't show you the Ireland side of the board in Rebirth because my mock-up doesn't have one. Scotland only for me. But that's enough to show you how the game works and to show me how the game feels to play it. I've played Rebirth twice, both times with 3 players. And that might be the optimal number to play the game because you don't have to do any modifications for that player count. With 2 players, you're going to take the pieces of a third color and put them on marked locations of the game board to simulate competition for castles and settlements and to break up long farms. It's a tactic that Knizia also used in 2023's Havilandi, where with 2 players, you put balloons on the board. And it works fine. I've played Havilandi with 2 players, and it's fine, but it's not, to me, the full game because all of those pieces are already down and I know what I'm working with. My opponent knows what we're working with for the entire game, rather than having people come in and surprise you with where they're going. That's what I want to play against, people surprising me. Although, hopefully, in a way that I can then surprise them back. With 4 players, each player is going to remove 9 pieces, or 9 tiles from play, 3 energy, 3 farm, and 3 settlements of size 2, 3, 4, so that you have roughly the same number of tiles going on the board. You'll have more competition, I imagine, for castles, just because you have more people to fight against. But, you know, I like the 3-player version because you don't have to modify anything. Take out the tiles, your pieces, you go. Again, at least with this mock-up. We'll see what happens with the final version. The gameplay in Rebirth really reminiscent of many other Knizia designs, especially Through the Desert and Blue Lagoon, which was also very Through the Desert-like. Babylonia, you got Havilandi, just because, again, every piece you're putting down, you're trying to do multiple things with it. And Through the Desert, you were trying to go for a majority in a color, and you're trying to reach an oasis, and possibly you're trying to fence off something, or you're trying to claim a watering hole. And so there's all this stuff you're doing at once by putting 1 camel down on the board. And that's how Rebirth feels as well, although typically it's 2 things. You're expanding influence on a castle, you are going into a settlement which also touches a castle, or you're building an energy or food farm which builds up that. So you're blocking people as well, and that is also another essential element that sometimes isn't clear as you're putting down the piece, but that definitely comes into play where you're trying to cut off someone else's farm while building yours, or go next to a cathedral while cutting them off, and it's all like mixing together. Another way the game feels like Through the Desert is that you have the 5-point castles scattered around the board that are counted at the end of the game. So it doesn't seem like much initially, but it is. I mean, like the old saying goes, you got 5 million here, 5 million there, pretty soon you're talking about real money. You're trying to do little bits at a time, and you do that constantly throughout the game by getting 1 point from an energy farm, and then 2 points, and then 1 point from a food farm, and so on. And often you're hopping back and forth across the board because you're getting mission cards that are driving you in certain locations, or you're just looking to establish big farm or energy fields over the course of play by possibly dancing around to get those mission cards early, establish castle first dibs. and then maybe connect them later because you're at the mercy of whatever you draw randomly. There's only 3 types of tiles, but you can definitely not get the tile that you want for several turns in a row, as happened in my games. Or you do, and everything works out. You're adapting to what other people do. You're all fighting in this shared space, competing for castles. You're possibly trying to block people out of cathedrals. This is not really an important thing. Potentially you're robbing them from points. Moreover, the cathedrals dry play a bit where definitely people, are, at least in my 2 games, were claiming next to them very early. And so that's already dotting things across the board and giving you something to build on, because it really helps to know what you're trying to do. If you pick up a late game card where it says have the most spaces next to this cathedral and it's already full, that's nothing. You just throw that away. There's no points there. So you want to get those early and then work on them from that point. So that's pretty much it. Lots of little bits coming together. I think of this actually as like, again, Knizia has done this many times, but it's like his idea of a point salad game. But you're scoring a few points throughout the game for these little different things, and yet everything's kind of integrated together. Where again, you're building the farm, and so you get 3 points, but there's more to it in the long run. But it's only these few types of things that you're doing. I was going to say energy farms, food farms, settlements, but then you also have mission cards and castles. But those are more endgame things. That's it. Very straightforward game, very appealing, very classic Knizia.